Hey, Matt. So I know that you are an expert, and your organization is an expert in ad fraud detection strategies. So I'd love to hear what are some of the strategies that are working and not working when it comes to ad fraud detection.
I think at a macro level, when we talk about beginning to attack and deal with the problem of ad fraud, we talk about two things. The first one is a culture of transparency and openness, so culture. And then the second one is technology. So if I then just kind of break that down a little bit, as far as the culture of openness and transparency goes, a lot of fraud is undetected. So it's an undetected, hidden cost of sale, which means that it's baked into all of the business results. And then inside the business results, you've got all the marketing KPIs and the sales KPIs and everything that feeds it. And fraud is built into all of those things. So often people's KPIs include all of the fraud already, whether that's the cost per click they should be getting, whether that's the cost per acquiring a customer that they should be getting, the amount of leads that they should be getting, the amount of conversions that they should be getting. The hidden cost of fraud goes all the way through. So the first thing is culture and having an openness to say, we want to open this box, Pandora's box. We want to look and find all the horrible thing that's inside. We're willing to put aside all of the KPIs that have got all of that fraud baked in. So it's not about KPIs. It's about getting to the true thing and the real thing. And so having that culture and openness within departments and across departments, so people are not actually incentivized to not find the fraud. And they're incentivized to go and look and find this thing without the kind of inhibiting factor of, well, this is going to mess up all of my reporting and all of my KPIs. So when we talk about, things that don't work and things that do work, the first kind of bucket there, I would say, is culture and that openness. And then the second one is technology. So again, there's layers to this answer, and there's a lot to unpack there because it's a big question. But having a commitment to technology, and that means using internal tools and using third-party tools. And it means not just relying on one of those, i.e. one internal tool if you have three, and one external tool when you can have three. It's about having an integrated tech stack right through the funnel, both your internal tools and your external tools, and using all of those things together to then figure out, where is this fraud and how do we go and detect it and prevent for it. So, to simplify that a little bit, often when we first start talking to clients is they'll say, oh, it doesn't matter about that because we got this. And it's extremely unlikely that that one thing is helping them to prevent fraud across right through the funnel, across all of those channels. It's not just extremely unlikely, it's impossible. And so, the second thing is technology and having the right approach and framework to bringing together internal tools and external tools to get a full and proper picture. So, when it comes to sort of saying what works and what doesn't, the overarching thing is you need to have the right culture and you need to have the right tech stack.
Got it. So culture and tech stack. Now, among those two, I imagine that the tech stack is a bit more straightforward because you talked about the culture side and KPIs. And I think this is where it gets a little bit challenging. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts because, like you said, a lot of people, they get incentivized. Either they get bonuses or they get raises, whatever it is, based on hitting their KPIs. And some companies, it's quite strict. So, obviously, if you do remove some of the past performance that was due to fraud, then the question is is it going to jeopardize my specific role? So I guess that's a question that many folks will have, even though it is the right thing to do. They will, some people may be looking at it from their perspective and saying, hey, I want to protect my own self-interest, so I'm going to kind of look the other way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we find this all the time. It could be, for example, that 20% of the traffic that you're winning is coming from bots. Right now, because of the way that bots work, what are the bots designed to do? They're designed to click on your ads. And so you're optimizing towards something which is optimizing towards you and is trying to seek out the opportunity to go and click on it. So in other words, your bot clicks are the most consistent and the lowest cost. So if your whole KPI is on driving cost per click to your website at the lowest possible cost, then those bots are actually helping you to hit your KPIs. And very probably you've been kind of getting better and better. You're on a journey. Maybe you've been with a company for 5 quarters, 18 months, and you brought the cost per click down. Well, 20% of it is completely useless and worthless to the company. But all of your performance and ego and KPIs are actually built into that. And so, it takes the right kind of, as I mentioned, approach, cross-departmental, and just being a business which is committed to saying it doesn't matter about that, because uncovering this 20% hidden cost that we have in the business is worth way more to us, right? So obviously it's worth more. It's just that we have a misalignment of KPIs here.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you're talking about culture, particularly at the top, someone who understands that it is impacting their organization in a negative manner, and so taking actions to remedy that. So I think yes, makes perfect sense. I know Geraldine has a couple of questions she wanted to ask you as well too. So Geraldine, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey Matt, thanks so much for sharing with us about the importance of a culture of openness and commitment to technology. And it's great that you mentioned a portion on customer success as well, because for that aspect, that is also equally important to platform companies like yourself. And what I hear when I speak to many MarTech leaders is that churn is kind of always an issue. But when I read your annual report, we learned that retention is actually doing really well in your organization. So what does that look like, and really how is your team organized in a way that actually ensures that so many customers continue to use your solution year after year?
Yeah, it's a great question. So and obviously there's a few different layers and elements to it, and so I'll just try to work through that value chain. So the first thing is, as you mentioned, that joined up sales and marketing process to make sure we're approaching the right clients with the right solutions in the first place. The second thing is that for all of our customers, as part of our onboarding, we actually give them a free trial. And when we run this free trial, we run in what we call detection mode only. So in other words, we go in there and we call it an audit. For the customer, it serves as a POC. And so, but for us, it's an audit, and we go and audit the channels that they're operating in. We give them full access to the technology. So now they can see the whole problem right before their eyes in one integrated dashboard. And so before they even become a customer, we have educated them on the problem statement. It also gives us an opportunity to do the business case element, right? And allow the buyer to take the time to see, okay, this is the size of the problem. How do we change that problem into a dollar number of value to my business? And then we issue them with a full report, which we build with them together, so they can take that to the CEO, the CFO, CMO, the board, their wife, whoever they need to go and, if they're the founder, whoever they need to go and get sign off for this thing. We're actually doing all of those hard yards before we even give them the opportunity of being a customer. We show them exactly what the problem statement is and build the business case with them together. So that onboarding process and that almost like handover, right, from sales to customer success then is the next link in the chain, is another kind of key critical part of growth and retention for us. And it's something I spend a lot of time on. And then once it's a customer, once an advertiser is a customer, they're then in the hands of customer success. So even though we are as you say, a platform business and a SaaS business, we have a very strong and robust service layer to what we do. So customers coming through that process, they are then given a service status, like platinum or blue. They pay for that status. We tell them how much servicing they're going to need. And then we have a team that then follows that exact process, whether that's bi-monthly reporting, monthly reporting. We get on a call with that customer once a month. Even though we're a SaaS company and they can access that dashboard together, people are busy, right? So we get on a call once a month and we review everything that's in the dashboard. We give them a report as a follow-up with next steps and action points. We show that where there are gaps in the tool that maybe they're not using, here's 3 features that you could use that would really enable you to prevent fraud even better. Here's some elements where you're still susceptible to fraud. This feature is going to help you. And obviously also the product feedback loop. So in those conversations, we're hearing from customers on other things that they need from us, which then go into the next sprint of the product roadmap. So one of the things I love about B2B tech stack, and I've worked in agencies, creative agencies, media agencies, ad networks, D2C businesses. I founded a couple of those. So I feel like I've been across the ecosystem one of the things I love about B2B tech stack is the kind of tech SaaS is the conveyor belt element of it, right? So once you have those links in the chain clear in your mind, and you put yourselves in the seat of the customer and what they're going to need right through that value chain, you're going to find that 70 to 80% of the time it's reasonably similar, and you can build the right processes and documents through that chain so that you delight the customer from the very first call to being a customer and being serviced. So, growth and retention, well, the question was more specifically about retention. So retention, it starts with that very first call and getting the right solutions into them. They've been properly qualified and identified. We've run a trial. We've created the business case. We have a strong customer success team. We handhold them through the product and through the experience. We check in on them once a month. So just care and process at every step of that journey is what's critical.
Well, that's you mentioned so many really wonderful points there. You talked about how you have been. It's really like an entire process, right? Having the process right, and then from the process itself, being able to generate like reliable results from there. That's how you actually maintain a consistent, be it growth or retention of customers as well. And that's really wonderful also that you mentioned about how actually retention begins from the beginning of the customer journey, even before they become like a customer also. So thanks so much for sharing these insights. I think that it would be really great for many of the SaaS leaders who are listening to this podcast who want to learn from that as well. So I guess my third question is really, if you think about most of our listeners, a huge bulk of them is actually marketers, right? So what advice would you give as CRO to a marketing leader who is interested in moving to, let's say, the role of someone looking after revenue, since the CRO role encompasses such a broad scope of things beyond just marketing alone?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess my first piece of advice would be don't do it. No, I'm only joking. So yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think there is overlap between the skills and capabilities and processes that a CMO puts in place and a CRO puts in place, right? There is a lot of overlap there. So in terms of who you need to be as a person and how you need to operate and the processes you need to put in place, there's a lot of overlap. So, if you're building a revenue machine, then you're building a repeatable process of going out to customers and telling a story to customers. If you're a CMO, you're building a repeatable process of going out to the market across a broader range of customers to go and tell that story. And so there's a lot of strategizing. There's a lot of building and operating. There's a lot of storytelling. And so there's a lot of similarities there. Segmentation, people management. I think that there is a lot of overlap between CRO and CMO. And ultimately, it's about storytelling. It's about understanding a story, making it compelling, and then landing it in market. And so the whole process is very similar. And I often think about sales as being, like the thing that you need to do. It's like the second worst form of advertising, right? Like if advertising was working 100%, you wouldn't need sales because customers would just come to you, right? But the reality is that it needs that last touch. And so it's like your least favorite form of advertising, right? So, we put we put advertising in to bring people to the front door, and then we need salespeople to go and bring them all the way in. And so a lot of those things are very transferable, in fact. In terms of my piece of advice, it would be to decide if you think that the overlap applies to you, right? Which is by which I mean, and we've recently appointed a world-class CMO here. And he's doing a great job. And so when I say when it applies to you, when I think about CMOs, and if you Google, right, different kinds of CMOs, you'll actually find pages and pages of different definitions of the CMO role. And you'll find different frameworks for defining the kind of CMO. So just Google it and have a look and you'll see. But when I think about CMO, I think about the kind of CMO who is a strategist. So the kind of CMO who looks across everything and can kind of, wax lyrical and tell you all about how it all works together and the neuroscience behind how people are affected by advertising, etc. And so that real high level kind of strategist. And within certain organizations, there is a place for those people, and they're some of the most intelligent people in marketing. So strategist. There's also another kind of these are my definitions, by the way. And as I mentioned, there's no fixed framework for this, so have a look. The second kind is a creative. So you find those CMOs whose everything that they do is anchored around the creative and the content, the kind of people who come up with amazing campaign ideas and a great way to tell a story. And this is going to resonate. And this is why I know. And, when you watch TV, you see some of the great creative minds coming up with excellent advertising. And so you find that kind of CMO who is a creator. And then the third kind is a builder. So that's somebody who comes in and like builds things from the ground up and puts all of the pieces in play across their own teams and third-party teams. And then the fourth kind, which is kind of closely related, is an operator. So they don't necessarily come in and build things from the ground up, but they're very good at operating across everything. So, that's how when I'm interviewing for CMOs and when I'm spending time with CMOs, that's the basic framework that I have in my mind. And now, as far as if you're a CMO who wants to become a CRO, if you're that nuts that you've decided that that's a good step to take, I think builders and operators are going to be excellent CROs in the main. Like if they're an excellent builder or operator CMO already, well, then they already have storytelling, right? And marketing messages and all of those things. If they become a CMO, then they have those things already. And then they over-index in building and operating. Well, that's a great fit for a CRO, right? And if you think about how I've described, the CRO role so far today, if you're kind of more of a strategist and you're more into creative, that's not going to translate so well to being a CRO in a B2B SaaS environment, which is about obsessing about that journey and every single little detail and element. And, if we just need to have this extra data point on the report, we're going to get an extra 5% conversion. And if we can pull this number in, that's going to deliver the value that little bit better. And how do I get 10 salespeople to nail this feature when they're all on different calls in different markets? Like these are builder and operator skill sets. And so, whereas with storytelling, creative and strategy, well, if you're a builder and operator CMO, you'll actually over-index on those for the CRO role already, right? But if you're a creator and strategist a CMO, but you're not a builder and operator, you're going to struggle in the CRO role for those reasons. So I think my key piece of advice would be to understand if you're that kind of CMO that is a good fit before you kind of think about it. And, I've met many CMOs who would be great CROs. And I think I would be an adequate builder and operator CMO, but I would be a terrible creator and strategy CMO.
Right, that's wonderful. I guess really understanding where your gaps are, and then what kind of CMO you are, and then from there, whether or not it makes sense to pivot into like a CRO. That's really very valuable advice. So, Joe, back to you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing that because I was just having this conversation yesterday with the head of a big university, and we're talking about the future of the CMO. I'm curious, do you think the future of the CMO is them eventually transitioning to a CRO role? The reason I say that is because I already see a lot of, particularly in tech, marketing roles reporting up to a commercial or a sales leader. So I'm wondering, do you see that transition from CMO to CRO for kind of replacing the CMO role eventually?
Yeah, I mean, like yourself, you will have seen that there are organizations now who are completely redefining that role of a CMO, right? And it's actually now sometimes called growth, right? Which brings it very close to the title of revenue. And what's actually happened there is digital, right? So in the old, without getting too kind of macro on this, but, we've moved out of a distribution economy where you have marketing messages here and then the point of sale is over here. And so those two things are disconnected. And obviously, what companies used to do was try to connect them as much as possible, but they're very disparate. And so Unilever would be kind of the best example of this, right? So marketing is sending out messages here, but then the product is sold through a completely different retailer at a completely different point of sale. So there is a large disconnect there. Whereas direct to consumer businesses and product businesses and platform businesses, Well, marketing is the product, right? The product is sales. And so, that's why we've got hybrid roles like product marketer, right? And product specialist. Where do these people sit? Well, they kind of sit partly in marketing, they sit partly in product, they sit partly in sales. And marketing needs to be a key part of how the product is shaped, because how your customer engages with you is marketing. And if you're a direct to consumer business, well, then how they engage with you is the actual product and platform. And so that's why you're seeing those roles merge. And so that's the move in the economy that's happened, and that's how the engagement with the customer has changed. It still doesn't completely morph the CMO role with the CRO role unless you decide that you don't need a sales team. So if you decide that you don't need a sales team, then your CMO is also responsible for revenue because you don't have a sales team, right? So at that point, the CMO is also the CRO. And I think that's where that chief growth officer role kind of comes in. Personally, I see very few businesses that could survive without a sales team at all. And I think that the role of CMO is so important to that product and how that product is taken to market and how we respond to customer feedback and the marketing messages we put in, that person would never also be able to run the sales team. So, there's a lot in there. I hope that's a useful answer. But, like I say, in summary, like I get why CMO has moved into growth, because product and platform is the key engagement with the customer now. And so they are absolutely critical to the monetization model and the commercialization model. And, here at TrafficGuard, I'm always saying to our CMO and our marketing teams, I want you to work directly with the sales teams. There's only so much that I can do. I want our CMOs to be speaking to our regional leaders and our sales teams all of the time. It has to be, coming back to that phrase before, an integrated sales and marketing process. But there's no way that our CMO would have the time or bandwidth to run the revenue team. Our product and our marketing would suffer, So I think those two roles are still separate, but CMO is more than ever a critical part of growth and retention.
That makes sense. And I think the challenge, I was speaking yesterday with a similar kind of senior executive, is as you talked about reporting. So does the sales team report to the CRO? Does it report to the CMO? Is it a joint kind of thing where they're kind of crisscrossing between the two? I guess, how do you see those teams being underneath those teams being built?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. So I think that, as I mentioned, those two departments now are integrated and working together more closely than ever. And their success, like most things in life, you're reliant on other people, right? So like the salespeople are only as successful as how good our marketing department is, because they're fixing the message, they're helping us source leads, they're creating all of the content, they're telling that story, they're arranging the events. This is all ammunition that the salespeople need in order to be successful. So sales is dependent on marketing to be successful. But the opposite is also true, right? Like marketing, if all of those things are happening in isolation of the sales team, or if the sales team is dysfunctional and poor and is not operating, then all of that work and investment that the business and those people put in then goes to waste within the sales organization, and it doesn't land and it doesn't translate to revenue. So those two things are now very much integrated, and there's a huge amount of codependency there. And my philosophy is the closer that those two teams work together, the better. I do that through metrics and KPIs, like with their shared KPIs. So marketing comes up with its KPIs around content and events and lead gen and white papers. An outcome of that is the number of leads that we generate. Those leads then cross-transfer into sales. Different markets and different sales are then KPI'd on taking those leads and converting them into trials and customers. And so those KPIs are interdependent and they run across. We report on these things live in HubSpot. We do that twice a week in sales meetings, commercial meetings, and marketing meetings. So it's my job to make sure that across those departments, all of those metrics are aligned and those codependencies are created, and it's all metric driven, and it's all tracked. And that's my role. Here at TrafficGuard, the sales team reports into myself and the marketing team reports into myself. So I'm the pivot right? Like I'm the person that sits and tries to bring it together. And that's why I joked before about, if you spend any time with me, I'll talk about joined up sales and marketing. And, I'm obsessed with it because I know that the closer that those two teams are aligned, the more those KPIs are aligned, the closer they work together, the more successful they'll be because of everything that I just said. They're completely reliant on each other. And the way that we handle it here is that they both report into me. So then my job is to make sure that that engine is working. And we do it that way because I think it's the best way to do it.
Good point. I think, going back to what you're saying, talking about shared KPIs, I don't know if I heard that correctly. You said marketing generally owns the KPIs up to leads, and then sales will take over from there, and then they will own it all the way over to deals close and retention and revenue.
That's exactly right. So we set marketing has KPIs on number of meetings generated. But then we the way that we do it here at TrafficGuard, and this is not necessarily the only or the right way, it's just the way that we do it here, is we take those meetings and we actually allocate them, right? So if, for example, marketing is responsible for driving 10, it's thousands, but let's keep the numbers simple, 10, then we take that 10 and we allocate it across different markets and sales generators. So it's now sales' job to partner with marketing to make sure that they get their share. So I've created that codependency. So if a salesperson comes to me and says, I've only got 30% of the meat is supposed to get from marketing, I'm like, well, it was your KPI to get the full 100% allocation. You better go and speak to marketing and sort it out, because otherwise, if it's, it's hard for me to manage otherwise, right? So I'm creating that connective tissue and I'm creating those shared KPIs so I can push the responsibility down and across the business to go and make it happen. So that's how I, manage it here. And you're exactly right. It's marketing responsible to be generating the call. And then it's then individuals' responsibility sales' responsibility to do enough meetings, to do enough trials, to do enough customer conversions. And obviously I set those KPIs and I carry them across both organizations myself. So that's how we do it here. There is an argument that would say, well, if marketing are driving leads that don't convert, then then we have a problem. But I like to focus on the things that we can control, and we'll deal with the problems as they arise. So up until now, we haven't felt the need to sort of set KPIs around leads that do convert. I could see that becoming a conversation in some organizations, but we have a very healthy call to trial and trial to client conversion rate here. It's not a problem statement. So because it's not a problem statement, I haven't need to make it a marketing KPI. So marketing KPIs for now is make sure that we have enough calls, and sales' KPI is make sure enough of them convert. And for now, that's working great for us.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's where most of the challenges happen in 90% of the B2B companies we see is the handover. The age-old thing is marketing says, we're getting you leads. Sales is like, it's crap leads. We can't close them, things like that. So, to your point, I think two things that I've seen work out very well, and you've already touched on them. One of which is marketing attending some of the sales meetings on a regular basis so they can understand what are the target accounts they're going after, and then the markets and so on. And the second thing that has worked out previously is what you were talking about is shared KPIs. So them working towards a common goal, because if not, it goes back to self-interest. And I know I talk about this a lot, but I've seen this kind of breakdown in many organizations where, marketing says, oh, I'm only responsible for leads. I don't really care about sales. And sales says, look, I'm only responsible for closing. I don't really care about leads, and so on. So I think those two things are the critical things that stood out to me. So I appreciate you sharing those, and hopefully more folks will implement those.
No worries. Yeah.
Would like to add as well is that I love how you're designing KPIs, because that really reminds me of what Charlie Munger always says, right? Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And you're kind of like really making sure the incentives are well designed so that you can achieve the outcome and revenue growth that you want.
100%. So the thing that I'm obsessed with is WIIFM. Do you know the phrase WIIFM? No? So WIIFM is what's in it for me. WIIFM.
Yes.
Yeah. So WIIFM, the what's in it for me. It's a very common mistake, which always surprises me when businesses or managers don't think about the WIIFM of everybody else. It's like everybody gets so obsessed with what they're trying to do and achieve that they're not thinking about the WIIFM for the other person. I'm sure it's not unique to me, but I do feel that because of my background and upbringing, and my career trajectory, as a founder and an entrepreneur, like I'm obsessed with the WIIFM. Like I don't expect anyone to do anything if it's not good for them at all. Like, I'm surprised people are even at work. Like why are you even here? Like I'm obsessed with the WIIFM, right? So when I'm setting KPIs and as I've just described, I do them very like detailed and integrated, and then we do a quarterly kickoff and we explain all of those things. The thing that I'm not talking about is overall revenue metrics going across every single department and equity, right? So that everybody has a share of the growth. So yeah, like it's the same thing that you just said, the quote that you just mentioned, which is a great quote. Yeah. And I just describe it as WIIFM. And, sometimes someone will say, if someone brings something to me and they're surprised it's not happening, I'll just go, well, WIIFM. I mean, that's why it's not happening, right? Like, why would they do it?
I love it. I wish we had more leaders like you, Matt. For everyone watching, listening to today's episode, feel free to share this. A lot of good practical tips on CROs, on ad fraud, and things like that. So feel free to share the episode, and I'm sure your colleagues will love it. Just remember what's in it for me or them, and I'm sure they'll love it. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.